Welcome back for another episode of Mind Split Cafe. I'm your co-host, Matt Palmquist, along with Chris Stowers. And this week we've got another guest that might seem familiar to you. She's so nice. We had to bring her back twice. Miss Brittany Henderson. She is a master social worker, LGSW, and CMCN. And I hope I got that right, Brittany. And I think I did. And this week we're going to be talking about, obviously, substance abuse. And thank you so much for joining us again and lending your expertise for the show this week. So welcome.
Brittany, long time no see.
I know. Thank you guys so much for having me back again.
I mean, we had so much content that we didn't even really touch on or explore your first episode. So we were like, we've got to bring her back. And voila, that's what we've done. So thank you so again for lending your expertise.
Happy to.
So thank you, Brittany, for coming in. Matt, thank you for bringing us into it. Last episode, or the episode that we did with you, it was kind of surface level substance abuse. So with this one, I kind of want to get deeper into it, a little more granular, and maybe explain a little bit more of the stages, things that happen in the brain during addiction, after addiction, things like that. So I will go ahead and start off and say, I guess it's good to say, what is the 5 stages of addiction or alcoholism?
Yeah, so your stage 1 is the first use, kind of that preemptive stage, just the introductory period to whatever substance, alcohol or whatever illicit drug you would have. Then you hit regular use, which is being, very routine usage. So running to, that the person that has that habitual glass of wine every single night to help them sleep, that's that regular use, or every single, Saturday, whatever it may be. And that's where most people stop in that regular use phase. The third phase, you have risky use. 4 is dependency. And then you're at that stage 5, which is an actual disorder.
And this is not just alcohol or drugs, right? This can be like addictions, right? Like gambling or like, I'm just trying to clarify. Like, I'm the everyday, dumb guy, right?
Right. So essentially, yes, it can be applied to all addictive behavior. I'm speaking like more specifically on alcohol and substances, but it can be gambling or risk taking of whatever kind somebody, might have, because they're not getting, they're getting that adrenaline from whatever behavior. So yeah, it can be.
What about, and because my wife and I watched this show yesterday, I'm not going to mention it on air, but it had to do, pretty much the guy was like a sex addict, right? Is that the same thing? Like, where that trigger or that signal in the brain is like, calling for it or wanting it, or just like you would with alcohol. Mine is Dr. Pepper. I shared that the last time, but like with sugar. But is that the same thing with like a full-blown sex addict? Is that similar? Is that kind of on par with alcoholism and maybe gambling?
Yeah, so that I think that can be a bit more complex to break down, but so can substance abuse, because you're looking at why somebody is doing, certain behaviors. But at the most simple form of it, yeah, it's still a behavior looking for increased dopamine or serotonin or whatever that increased drug chemical flow they're looking for in the brain.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a lot of words that get thrown around with substance abuse being one of them, addiction being one of them, and dependency being one of them. And all 3 of them kind of mean something different. I mean, I guess they all mean the use of a substance in excess, but they mean something different. Addiction isn't substance abuse, and substance abuse isn't dependency. Am I correct there? And maybe you can kind of guide us on what those are.
They are used interchangeably. Sorry. I think when someone has an addiction, it's used pretty interchangeably. You could say it's basically the same as addiction, substance use disorder. Those are very much from everything I've been taught, learned, seminars, things like that. Those are kind of one and the same. The one that is a little different is the dependency. And that can kind of be set apart a bit. It's a fine line, but that one does have its separate category because it's stage 4. And then you've got the substance use disorder, which is the kind of polite way, the politically correct way now of saying addict.
So you can say that someone is dependent on, let's say, a pain medication, but not having substance abuse disorder. Is that correct? Because I mean, you know, my grandma takes pain medication and she has to have it, otherwise she'll go through physical withdrawals. But it's not that she needs it and she wants it and she craves it. So is there a difference there?
So I think the dependency piece is that someone needs this X to survive, right? Whether that's your pain medication because you have fibromyalgia or you know, there's a dependency on a substance. The disordered piece comes and the addiction component comes when kind of life can't go on, you know, after that part. And the dependency really starts to run into, like, there's a very fine line because the dependency really starts to run into that area of that physical component versus just the psychological.
Well, what I find interesting, and I'm curious to explore just because of, you know, selfish reasons or personal reasons. You mentioned when you said the second step was like somebody that needs something like every night, like a habit type thing, right? So I'm that guy that has like a whiskey every night, you know, like just to kind of like a nightcap, right? It's not like me getting behind the car or doing anything crazy or wilding out, right? But it just settles my nerves to have that whiskey, you know, after a long day around 6-7 o'clock, you know, and it's just kind of like, okay, my day is done. Let me just have a drink and just kind of relax, right? Is that a problem? Am I like on the borderline of, because again, I'm sharing this. My grandmother was an alcoholic, 50 years sober, right? So for somebody that's similar to me that has that nightcap at night and comes from the family genetics that, you know, I inherited, am I at risk for going on to stage 3, 4, 5? Like, what are your I mean, it might be a dumb question, but if it's dumb, please tell me. You know,
no, I think it's a good one.
You know.
No dumb questions. Yeah, so I say that regular use, that routine, that habit is where most people sit.
Okay.
And it creates comfort with whatever it is. I'm sugar, you know, like I like sweets, and I've inherited my grandfather's sweet tooth. So, but then there's that fine line of when it becomes more. If the danger with it is that once you become a creature of habit, it is very difficult to break habits, right? 21 days makes habit is pretty much kind of that adage that we've all grown up with. So that breaking a habit, if you can break a habit at any time and you're like, you know what, I'm going to put this down, and it's good to that's why I think you see people going on sugar detoxes and things like this. It's because they want to break up that routine and break that habit and make sure that they're not developing a dependency on something. So I have my great grandfather died an alcoholic. So alcoholism runs in my family. And for that's one of the reasons that, my family, we totally abstain, is because there is that genetic component. So it's flirting with a fine line. There's genetics, but then there's also your environment. So using you as an example, you've got this habit and you have this genetic background with it. It can be very hairy for yourself. So if you ever find yourself, I think last time we kind of talked about, the flags, you're in this green flag phase of life, and then you get green and yellow, and then you get green, yellow, red. Once you find yourself in situations where you're starting to have more yellow and red versus, green with some yellow spotted in, that's where people lean on that substance, again, sugar, alcohol, illicit drugs. And that's when you really, really have to be careful.
Well, I'm definitely going to heed your advice. And, I'm
Dr. Pepper too.
5 o'clock instead of 7 now.
That's sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did give up Dr. Pepper. I have not had a Dr. Pepper in almost a month and a half now.
I'm not sure I believe that.
And I used to, I promise you. And I also, I used to drink like those monsters, like those energy drinks, like crazy. I'm talking about the big ones, like 3 of them a day. Jesus. And I haven't had a monster since November of 2022. So yeah.
Very impressive, actually.
So now I just need to give up chicken fried steak, and I think I'm solid, right? But I'm from Texas. I'm kidding. But thank you so much. I again, it's more like a nightcap. It's never like, hey, let me get behind the wheel and let me go to this bar. It's just always at the house and just kind of just relax, like jumping in a pool for a swim or a workout. Like it's,
you're one and done, kind of sipping through the night routine.
Like a social type. Yeah. One and done, maybe 2. I'm a big boy, right? So 2 is kind of my cap, but that's it. I mean, I don't want it to get too hairy, so I'm gonna be observant of those flags, so to speak.
That was a good question, because it actually brought up another question that I've had in mind. And you were saying that, is it genetic? Can it be passed down? From what I understand, addiction is a biopsychosocial model. So there's 3 aspects to it: genetics, the psychology of it, I believe, and the social life of it. Can you explain that a little bit to us?
Yeah. So you gave us the 3 places that comes from you. I have a genetic predisposition, essentially, coming from my great grandfather. So I've decided, I'm not going to add that psychological component or the social piece. I keep it off there because I already know I've got, one of those pillars. Other individuals might be like, well, I've got that that biological component, but, moving into the psychological piece, they may have the glass of wine when they go out socially, or, like Matt does, and have his routine of it. But when the life stressors start to really amp up, they back off. Because when you get all 3, it can become this perfect storm. And some people, it's just that genetic piece. We don't really know how much of the genetics it takes, right? Because you can have twins that are in the same household. One develops the alcoholism that dad or whatever family has. The other one doesn't, and they grew up in the same environment. So it really still leaves a lot of questions on how how much biology pulls. But, going to the psychological part, when you're under a lot of stress, if you have comorbid mental health, diagnoses, depression, anxiety, those lead people to look for comfort somewhere, because emotions are very intense and very high. And we know that alcohol is a depressant, so it helps numb and take those emotions away. That's very comforting for individuals. And Western society is huge. I mean, almost anything you go to, people are looking for the alcohol. They're asking if it's going to be there. Actually, I saw an article online, and there was this gentleman, and his best friend was getting married. And it was very well known that the wife and her family did not drink. But, all of his friends came to the wedding. It was this gentleman's best man. And he posted on like Reddit or something, and he was livid and actually approached the best man and the the groom and the bride, so upset because there was no alcohol at the wedding. So it just to use as an example of how expected it is to have alcohol at any type of function.
Any celebratory type atmosphere, right? Yeah.
Well, celebratory, but even just like, you can't go to people don't go to restaurants typically that don't serve alcohol. Like, if a restaurant performs so much better if they serve alcohol, because that's just what is expected in Western society. And so when you have
those, is nuts. The markup on alcohol is crazy. Like, I'm speaking from a business side. Like, the markup
right?
alcohol is, 5x,
it's like in the 60%.
Whatever it is. Yeah, like, I understand why the business serves the alcohol, because margins are greater in that sense, right? And so if you're gonna have a table of 3, like me, you, and Chris, and we're at dinner, then if they put a drink menu out in front, then that bill is going to go a little higher, and they're going to make a little bit more money, right? So
the bill's at least doubled, right? In most cases. Yeah, the bulk of the bill, even, I think, for a lot of people, tends to be the alcohol.
You can look at my freaking credit card statement. Yeah, it's definitely alcohol on the bills, right?
And because it's so widely accepted, even functional alcoholism, being dependent, is so widely accepted. The abuse is so widely accepted, because as long as you can function, as long as you can go to work, as long as you're not immediately hurting other people. So, no domestic violence, you're not getting behind the wheel of a car, anything like that. But the moment there's some kind of transfer to someone else, then people want to start pointing fingers and saying that there's a problem, when really there was a problem way before we ever got to that point.
So I might be oversharing in this, but I was in Vegas last week for business, right? And I had an anxiety attack, like a panic attack. And had I been socially drinking throughout the 3 or 4 days that I was there? Yes. Like, you have a drink at dinner, like, I was there for work, but at the same time, I don't know if the alcohol contributed to the panic attack, or I do suffer from imposter syndrome, where I feel like I am not adequate enough or good enough as my peers, and that I am, it's a facade or a mirage, or whatever you want to call it, right? So I think I'm going to diagnose myself. I mean, you're the one with all the degrees and stuff, but I think the panic attack came on because of that factor of the imposter syndrome, but it was accelerated by the alcohol, because you did say that alcohol is a depressant, correct? So
correct.
That kind of just put the foot on the gas and was like, you know, like, all right, you're gonna have a full-blown panic attack in Vegas at the Wynn, Matt. Like, good luck, you know. So that's exactly what happened, you know.
And that does happen. That some people, they drink to steady their nerves, calm their anxiety, and kind of get the liquid courage
Yeah,
piece of it. Other people, it's just like your doctor would prescribe you a pharmaceutical. It's kind of playing a little game to figure out what works. Not all antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds work for every single person. That's why there's a billion, or we'll say at least $1 million industry, if not multi-million into the billions for just psych meds. And alcohol works the same way. Yeah.
hmm.
So I have another question that's kind of along the lines of it. What's going on in someone's head when they're in substance abuse, as far as the disorder and just a day-to-day process for someone that's in full-blown addiction?
So at the addiction point, it's not that the person even you can put anything in there. You can put cocaine, alcohol, heroin, pick your drugs. Um, there is a physical component. The body, the brain, the body have become so dependent on a specific substance that now when someone is in that addiction phase, that abuse phase, they have to have it to be able to survive, which is why they really don't recommend that anybody goes through the detox unless it's medical, so that because hearts stop, people die in those processes, and it's not for the mental piece of, oh, okay, my nerves are calm, I'm good. It's the physical withdrawal, the physical not having of that substance on the body, and the
Or it could
body
kill
just,
you.
it can't handle it. Yes.
Essentially, it could kill you. Like, you wanting to better yourself and quit this addiction, or on the road to recovery, whatever you want to call it, you could physically die because of the physical aspect that your addiction tolls on your body, correct?
Correct, which is why it's recommended to do it under medical supervision so that heart rate can be monitored, blood oxygen levels can be monitored, because the body can, but it really has to be. Cold turkey is never recommended. It's got to be a slow titration, so that, say somebody's at, we'll just use 100 as a really nice round, 100 milligrams of alcohol every single day. Well, then, if they're going to start detoxing, they might do 90 for a couple of days. And then, a few days later, they titrate down to 80. And then they get down to, if they're doing really well, they might bump it down to 60. And, for a day, see how that goes. And it's to slowly titrate off of the drug so the body can readjust on a chemical level
Yeah.
to be able to not function with it.
And then, I mean, obviously you're talking about like substance right now, right? But in the
Right.
sense of, like, if I was not I, but if the person was a gambling addict, are you saying, like, instead of betting 7 days a week, $1,000 a day, just so to speak, like, I'm only going to gamble 6 days and only $900? Yeah, I mean, like, how
The tapering process of gambling.
like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna taper it off, like, like.
So, I mean, that, I guess the same premise can be used, but it is very different than that. If you take an individual who has a substance abuse
Mhm.
addiction, right? And then you take an individual who has a gambling addiction, if you stick them both in jail cells, one could die, the other one will not, as far as we know,
That is a
So
great example. Yeah.
there's that physical need, the actual on a cellular level need for that substance, versus and not to say that there's not a chemical reaction, because there's that high that the brain gets every time it thinks it's going to win, but it's not on the same level.
That's a great way to to explain it. You're right. Like, you put two people, separate people in there. One could die from their addiction. The other one is just gonna get. I mean, he could try and gamble with his life in the pen.
I'm saying,
like,
people can get very, there is a risk factor, and not to belittle, gambling at all, because people engage in risky behavior, risking their homes, their jobs, cars, money, all kinds of stuff, which can lead to other things. But yeah, at the very core of it, one person can be locked in a room for a week. They're going to walk out alive. The other one can be locked in the room for a week, and there's a chance that they might not walk out of that room.
So since we're on alcohol and we're talking about the withdrawals, or the absence of alcohol, possibly killing them, what are some of the withdrawals that become lethal? Like, I know delirium tremors that can actually turn into a seizure. What else gets you, or what gets them to the point that they're going to die, as far as the withdrawals?
Yeah, so I think the DTs, I just like saying the phrase.
You just like saying what?
I just like saying DTs.
Okay, we'll just say DTs.
No,
I like saying DTs. Yeah.
I like that he gave the name. Fun. The tremors are a side effect of the removal of the substance. Yeah. So, it's just that the body, it depends on the chemical for survival. It would be like taking, we require boron to live, right? We need boron, absolutely have to have it to live. You remove boron from someone's system, boop, done. Wow. The same with whatever drug of choice it is. They have to have time to readjust and for their body to learn how to make whatever chemical it is on its own again at safe levels. Now, boron, we can't live without that, but just kind of using, something that we rely on for survival the same way that an addict can rely on it for survival.
This is why we brought you on again. Like, you got to come on like 5-6 more times throughout this series.
I'm telling you, man, substance abuse, we can go for days with this. Anything with mental health we can, but with substance abuse,
I apologize if I ask really dumb questions, but I'm just kind of curious to see what is the relationship and the between the abuse and different substances. I mean, when I say substances, I mean not just like illegal drugs or whatever, but I'm just talking about like sugar or like alcohol or whatever. I'm just curious to know if it all kind of is, if it's correlated, if it's.
Yeah, I mean, you have people who, have a regular intake of caffeine. They try to stop that cold turkey. They get migraines, headaches, cranky. Me, sugar. And sugar's in so much of our food nowadays. But here's my example of that. I back at the beginning of the year, I was in Panama for a couple of weeks, and when I first got there, I was eating, and the food's delicious, by the way. But I was eating it, and I was just noticing, I was like, this just really tastes different. It's kind of off. And it took my taste buds about 3 days to acclimate, because I was like, wow, like this stuff really needs sugar. I try to be cognizant of my sugar intake just for health as a whole. But like, if somebody's like, want a chocolate chip cookie, I'm like, yeah, I do. You know,
me and you are on the same boat right there, Britt. Like I'm the same way. I'm never gonna pass up a chocolate chip cookie.
Right. But it was so crazy about how much less sugar is added into the food. And once you're able to have that clean palate, I came back to the States and I started eating, and I just I couldn't eat so much. I couldn't eat out. I couldn't eat places. I had to make all of my own food. because I had more control over the sugar. But using that, if you came off sugar, if I came off sugar cold turkey, I've tried it before. I am mean and cranky and lethargic. And
it does that to me with coffee.
Yeah, coffee. Caffeine's
I get
the
crazy
same.
headaches.
Cranky headaches. And that is a dependency, even to go as far as to, say abuse. Our caffeine abuse is wild.
I can wholeheartedly say I abuse caffeine. Like I for sure do.
I do. And you know what? I'm guilty. I'm gonna come on here and say I'm guilty. Like I have probably caused my wife at least 3 cavities because I am so sweet. And
Wait, you're so sweet, or you get her sweets?
No, I'm
He's
so sweet.
just so sweet.
I'm so sweet. She's like, she's got cavities. So no, I'm just kidding. Tess, if you ever watch this episode, I'm messing with you. But yeah, no, that's just a dad joke. I always say that. But thank you so much. This 30 minutes has flown by. Like,
oh, it's already time. Wow.
Yeah, it's already time. Like I am so enamored with you, the information and the content that you have, Britt, and you're more than welcome to come back anytime and talk about substance abuse or whatever you want to talk about. Just hit us up. But
put it on the books. We already need another one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm addicted to this topic.
Yeah, I'm addicted to Brittany being on the show. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
You're sweet.
But thank you so much, Brittany. Brittany Henderson, Master Social Worker. And I'm gonna get all these acronyms. MSW, which is Master Social Worker, LGSW, which is LGSW, and then
Read his own handwriting.
Yeah, and then CMCN, which is you're gonna have to tell me what those mean, Brittany. So can you fill us in before we leave? LGSW is what?
LGSW is licensed graduate social work
Okay.
Social worker, yeah. And then the CMCN is certified managed care nurse.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not a nurse, but I am certified for managed care management, account management, things like that. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, on that note, we are going to CYA later. I'm just kidding.
You crack me up, Matt.
Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Mind Split Cafe. Tune in next week. We're going to have another great guest. It might be Brittany because we're addicted to her. I don't know, but if it's not, I can guarantee you it's going to be a great guest. And Brittany will be back at some point. I promise you that. So thank you again for tuning in, and check us out next Wednesday. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.